Hello, I'm Art Torres. Welcome to this episode of Daggett to Daggett. So now you're wondering, what's Art Torres doing in Barstow, California, in front of the Idle Spurs Steakhouse? This is why we're here today, to talk about this wagon. Its iconic beginning and its end of the trail here at the Idle Spurs Steakhouse in Barstow, California. It starts out in 1908 when Howard Hill came from Idaho on a wagon pulled by 4 horses. On this wagon was used for many purposes once they got in Daggett, came to Daggett. And the main reason for this wagon at that time was there was a place on the west side of town called the Old Slaughterhouse. Dix Van Dyke would get an order for a couple steers to be butchered, and he'd go out to Camp Katy and he'd bring them in to the slaughterhouse west of Daggett. They would be taken care of there. They would use this wagon to take the meat, bring the meat of the 2 steers or whatever they would slaughter, take them to Daggett at the old Ryerson's Market. They'd back it up to the dock, and they'd come out with a big old chain hoist, pick up the dead steers, take it in there, and then start making their steaks or whatever type of custom cutting they needed to do with this meat. So it was used for many years for that. The next part of his life, this thing was used for a place in Daggett. It was owned by Peter Wick Bessis, and he was a world-renowned concert pianist that a train broke down in Daggett one time, and he was walking around Daggett for a while they got the train going, or waiting for another train or something, and he liked it. He liked Daggett. He kept coming back. He lived out of L.A., but he went all over the world to do his concert deals. Anyway, he came and he wanted to stay around a while. And he built a restaurant there, which was a 5-star restaurant, like this place here. And it was called Tall Trees. And they would use this wagon to go to the Ryerson's Market, pick up the meat, and then bring it to the restaurant. And they had a little small walk-in ammonia refrigeration unit. That's how it was cooled, by ammonia. And so in 1950, Chuck and Jeannie O'Hara bought this, and they're the ones that owned the Idle Spurs. Of course, back then it was a ranch house. Anyway, they bought it, and they played around with it for a little bit, and then eventually put it here on permanent display. And it's been here ever since. So this is the end of the trail. The beginning of the trail, this thing was in 1883. This was built by the Ingalls Wagon and something or other Works company. And it started in 1883, and here it is. If this thing could talk, the stories it could tell. And that's why we're here at Barstow, California, in front of the Idle Spurs Steakhouse, the greatest place in Barstow at the time. And now we're going to take you to another location and show you more of this story. Here we are at the old slaughterhouse. We used to come here when we were teenagers. The water was coming through in the irrigation ditch here, and we'd drink beer and have a good time and all that good stuff. But this is where Dix Van Dyke, or whoever worked out there, would bring cattle from Camp Katy, and they would put them in the corrals over here. What's left of them, there they are, for a couple days, get them all loosened up, and then they'd bring them inside here, and they had an overhead beam with the chain fall. They'd get the steer, they'd shoot them on the wagon, and then he'd fall it, and then they'd bring them in, they'd butcher it all out. So this is called the Old Slaughterhouse. And meat that was cooked and ate in Barstow and Linwood and all over this country most of the time at that time, in that time era, from 1920 to all the way to the 1949, 50, something like that, came from here. Well, here we are at Daggett, right in front of the Desert Market, which at one time was known as Scott's Market, Ryerson's Market, and it had a couple other names that I can't recall at this point. And this is where that wagon that we just saw at Idle Spurs came up. This was all dirt road at one time. It came up through here. This was all dirt. And it came down to this dock over here to where it backed up to that dock. And there was a beam outside of from inside to outside that had another chain fall. And they would go out there, they'd hook the meat, take it inside. They had a big table in there. And that's where the butchering started. And it was catered to whoever bought the steer, owned the steer. It was catered to that customer. The gentleman that I mentioned earlier that had the Tall Trees restaurant was right around the corner. That was a 5-star restaurant, just like the Idle Spurs. They would haul meat over there, or it kept meat here. There used to be a big old tower up here on top of the roof. It was ammonia, cooled with ammonia. It was a heck of a freezer, and the only one in the high desert for a long time. So they would keep the meat here, and the people that had restaurants or stores or whatever that sold meat would come over here, get their meat, and take it to be sold in other places of the Mojave Desert, Southern California. But yeah, they used to bring it right there. That trailer did this all the time for many years, from 1907 or 1907, because it was here when the first market was here, and then the other one, it burnt down in 1908, and they rebuilt this one in 1909 or 1912, whatever it was. And once they rebuilt it, they continued with the meat coming down here and everything else. And that lasted for all the way into the early 40s. And when the war started, then things changed. One of the butchers here that worked here for a handful of years was a gentleman. If anybody knows my good friend, best friend, Rodney Rucker, his mother, Thelma, his mother's dad was a butcher here for a handful of years. So there's a little bit of history with the local people here too. So, and part of the story of that wagon, in 1939, when they were shooting on Old 66, when they were shooting The Grapes of Wrath, the movie, that wagon was used in that movie, The Grapes of Wrath. And I want to say scene 16, scene 18, whatever it was. You'll see that there's a background. And yeah, they used it for that movie. It was also used on a movie with Glenn Ford was the main actor, called Cimarron. It was about the land grab in Oklahoma or wherever it was, and everybody had wagons and they would run to claim their land and everything else. So that's how that wagon was well used, and a few other smaller series, weekly series westerns and stuff. It was used on a lot of that. Yeah, I'm hoping that you like this about a little wagon. People drive by that wagon by Idle Spurs forever. I mean, I'd look at it all the time when I'd go there, but never knew the history of it until I got into it. So this is your chance to learn more about the history of that little wagon that we all drove by. And here at the Daggett store, a lot of people didn't know this was a big butcher shop. It was awesome. It had so much square footage, and they could hang meat. They had great butchers that worked here, and we'd come here on payday to get some meat or stuff like that. So I wanted to reflect that, let everybody see that. I'd like to give a shout out to a good friend of mine, Gary Watson, over in 29 Palms. He's a mechanic there, keeping our Marine Corps customers over there safe in their vehicles and equipment. He's a mechanic over there, and I just want to say, hey, Gary, keep doing your good job. Thank you very much for what you do. With that being said, I'd also like to tell you about our merchandise. Here's our koozie for those that drink a beer or two every once in a while. Here's our koozie that we got at the Desert Springs or the Elephant Mountain Gentlemen's Club, whatever you want to call it. And we also have the t-shirt sales. Oops, here we go. At Desert Springs. Anyway, thank you for watching this episode. We hope to see you next time with something different. And let us know on your responses if we're doing something right or wrong, or a suggestion.